Me dices a mí, también.
¿Cómo?
Me dice Damián que se los lleva.
¿Escucha bien? ¿Sí? Okay. Les damos la más cordial bienvenida a la UNAM, a este Instituto de Investigaciones Sociales de la Universidad Nacional Autónoma de México. Tenemos el placer de recibirles en esta ocasión, gracias al contacto con Damián. Okay.
Okay. So welcome everybody. We have the pleasure to receive you here. And this is the Institute of Social Research.
Okay. Gracias al contacto con Damián, que nos conocemos ya de hace años, y con Dina también.
Pues, thanks to the contact all many years with Damián and with Dina.
Y bueno, pues gracias a Damián, a Dina, a Verónica por organizar este grupo tan multinacional.
Thanks for organizing this with this so international group.
Y Damián me mostró ya el programa, y creo que se van a llevar una idea obviamente no completa, pero por lo menos bastante buena, de lo que ha estado sucediendo y lo que sigue sucediendo y lo que probablemente va a seguir sucediendo en el país.
I saw the program, and I believe that you are going to really have a very good view of what has happened in this country, what is happening in this country, and what will probably happen in this country in the future.
Quiero empezar por leer el currículum de cada una de las personas que están aquí en el podium.
I'm going to present now the people that are going to present.
Creo que va a ser un poco tardado traducir todo esto.
No, exactly.
¿No? ¿Sí?
Yeah, maybe just one line of for each.
Muy bien. Empezaremos con la doctora Ángela Bacca, aquí a mi izquierda. Ella es socióloga de la Universidad Nacional de Colombia y maestra y doctora en Ciencias Sociales con orientación en Sociología por la Facultad de Ciencias Políticas de esta universidad.
We will start with Ángela Bacca. She is from Colombia. She is from the National University of Colombia. But also she is now attached to this university in political sciences.
Ella es profesora asociada de tiempo completo, adscrita al Centro de Estudios Sociológicos de la Facultad de Ciencias Políticas y Sociales. Y sus líneas de trabajo son cambio social y cambio jurídico en México y Colombia, procesos de individualización, jóvenes y transgresión con perspectiva de género.
Yeah, and her lines of research are social change and juridical change, and also working with young people. Yes.
Sí. Bueno, coordinó el libro Individualización y Derecho al Libre Desarrollo de la Personalidad, aproximaciones al cambio social y jurídico en México y Colombia.
Maybe Ángela, you tell the name of the book. She coordinated a book called
Individualization and Right to the Free Development of the Personality in approximations to the social change and juridical change in Mexico and Colombia. Y con la doctora Julian Boudreau coordinó el libro Mujeres habitando la ciudad, transgresiones, apropiaciones y violencias.
Okay, and with in collaboration with a colleague, she coordinated a book about women, transgression, and appropriations and violence.
Yeah. Muy bien. El doctor Damián Zaitch, que ustedes ya lo conocen, ya conocen su currículum. Tenemos también al doctor Carlos Antonio Flores, aquí a mi derecha. Es también doctor en Ciencias Políticas y Sociales por la Facultad de Ciencias Políticas y Sociales de la UNAM.
So he's doctor. So we have here Carlos. He's a doctor in juridical sciences and is also inscribed in the political science department in the UNAM.
Tiene varios libros de su autoría, entre ellos El laberinto de espejos, Estados Unidos, de la construcción de la doctrina de seguridad nacional a la guerra irregular y la militarización de la lucha contra las drogas, que está en proceso de publicación.
He has many books, but one of them actually is about what we heard yesterday, about the militarization of the war on drugs.
Otro libro es Negocio de sombras, red de poder hegemónica, contrabando, tráfico de drogas y lavado de dinero en el estado de Nuevo León.
He also has a book on money laundering, drug trafficking, and organized crime in the state of Nueva León, which is Monterrey, ¿no? It's in the north.
Ajá. También Historias de polvo y sangre, génesis y evolución del tráfico de drogas en el estado de Tamaulipas.
And also a book on the history of drug trafficking in the estado of Tamaulipas.
Northeast of Mexico, the U.S. border. Muy bien. Y también ha sido profesor investigador asociado en la Universidad de Oslo y en la Universidad de Connecticut.
He has been an associate professor in the University of Oslo and University of Connecticut.
Y es actualmente profesor investigador titular en el CIESAS, a donde van a ir hoy en la tarde.
Yes, and he's also now inscribed in the CIESAS, which is the institute that we are going to go after this afternoon.
Ahora con el doctor César Alarcón, aquí a mi izquierda, que también es doctor en Ciencias Políticas y Sociales y maestro en Estudios México-Estados Unidos por la Facultad de Ciencias Políticas de la UNAM.
And now we have César, that is doctor in social and political sciences, and a master in, maybe you say it yourself.
USA-Mexican relations.
Actualmente es consultor independiente y ha trabajado sobre temas de delincuencia organizada, violencia criminal y terrorismo en Estados Unidos, Colombia, Brasil y México.
So he's independent consultant now on issues on drug trafficking, on organized crime, terrorism, and in many countries, in the US, in Brazil, Colombia, México.
Es autor de un libro que está próximo a aparecer, que se llama Mercados Ilegales, Tráfico de Drogas y Seguridad Pública, la acumulación social de la violencia en México.
He's an author of a book that is just about to appear, which is about
illegal markets, drug trafficking, and the social accumulation of violence in Mexico.
Entre sus líneas de trabajo, de investigación, está la dimensión organizacional de los grupos delictivos en México y la relación entre terror, terrorismo y delito organizado en Colombia y México.
Among his lines of research, we have, he's very interested in how these groups are organized. So he's really focusing on that, and also on the relationship between terrorism, and organized crime.
Muy bien. Y finalmente, yo soy investigador de este instituto y mi libro más reciente lo pueden bajar de la página de aquí del instituto, o si lo quieren impreso, lo tienen que comprar aquí al lado. Es sobre el sexenio del gobierno anterior, del gobierno de Peña.
And I'm Luis Astorga, and my last book is, actually you can download it, PDF, it's open, but if you want a paper, you can buy it there, and it's a book about organized crime and drug trafficking in the period of the last president, Peña. He writes books per president, so he has one on Calderón, then on Peña, and now he's finishing his book on this period of the presidency. So I added a little bit of more about it.
Bien, bueno, comenzamos con las... lanzando algunas ideas que ya están, ya las vieron en el programa.
We are going to start right now with some things that you have been already seeing in the program.
Sí, bueno, como estudiantes de ciencias sociales saben que hay distintas perspectivas, distintas metodologías para tratar de entender la complejidad de los fenómenos a los que nos enfrentamos. En este caso particular, pues el de la delincuencia organizada y la política de drogas.
As students of social sciences, as social science scholars, you know that there are different perspectives, different approaches to focus on the issue of organized crime and drug trafficking.
Mi perspectiva es para el estudio de la sociedad mexicana en estos temas, es ver la configuración y reconfiguración de varios campos de poder y su interrelación que a su vez obviamente influyen en la misma sociedad. Estos campos que analizo son el político, económico, militar y el delictivo.
My perspective is to analyze the configuration and reconfiguration of what he calls power fields around this problem, and particularly I look at the economic, the military, and the criminal.
Political.
Political, sorry.
Y clasifico las fases de la seguridad en México en el siglo XX y en lo que va del siglo XXI en tres. Obviamente otros colegas tendrán otras clasificaciones. Yo tengo estas tres. La primera,
I classify, I find three phases in the development of security in the 20th, 21st century in Mexico. Other colleagues have different phases, but I focus on three. I see three phases here.
La primera, la seguridad autoritaria en el Estado postrevolucionario con partido hegemónico y predominio del Poder Ejecutivo sobre el Legislativo y el Judicial, y control político, militar y policíaco del campo delictivo.
The first phase I identify is what I call authoritarian security approach. This is the period post-revolution with the PRI. We saw yesterday about that. The PRI, we was 70 years in power. And and what are the characteristics of this?
Predominio del Poder Ejecutivo sobre el Legislativo y el Judicial.
Yes, all this period is the predominance of the executive power on the judicial and the legislative.
Y control político, militar y policíaco del campo delictivo.
And total control of the criminal field by the military control on the criminal field.
Political, military, and police control. La segunda fase es la inseguridad en la transición democrática, caracterizada por la alternancia en el poder desde los años 80 del siglo XX, la desarticulación de los mecanismos de control anteriores, una mayor autonomía relativa del campo delictivo respecto del poder político fragmentado.
I cannot. The second phase is what I call the phase of insecurity, which comes after, with the end of this period with the PRI, and is characterized by
alternancia en el poder,
alternative powers, so parties starting to have some kind of alternative times. Yes.
Since the 80s in the 20th century. La desarticulación de los mecanismos de control anteriores.
This desarticulation of the control mechanisms that existed before, so that disappears. This control again between the political, military on the criminal field, and there was total control. This disappears.
Una mayor autonomía relativa del campo delictivo respecto del poder político fragmentado.
More autonomy of the criminal field from the political field, which is now fragmented.
Particularmente de lo que se denominará como delincuencia organizada a partir de los años 90 del siglo XX.
What we call after the 90s organized crime, basically.
Y una mayor autonomía de los poderes legislativo y judicial respecto del ejecutivo.
And this is important. This new period has a more autonomy of the judiciary and the legislative from the executive power. So there is more autonomy in this second period of these two things.
Y la tercera fase, que denomino la inseguridad autoritaria, que va del 2018 a nuestros días.
And the third phase, which I called authoritarian insecurity, which comes from 2018 to today.
En esta fase se puede observar una estrategia liderada por el propio presidente de retorno acelerado al predominio del poder ejecutivo sobre el legislativo y el judicial.
What we see in this new phase, in this third phase, is an attempt from the executive power to regain control on the legislative and the judiciary. an attempt to do that, to regain control from the executive.
Al intento de control o destrucción del Poder Judicial,
An attempt to control or destroy the judicial power.
Y de las instituciones autónomas como el Instituto Nacional Electoral y el Instituto Nacional de Transparencia y Acceso a la Información, entre otros.
To destroy different organisms like an organism that deals with transparency and an organism that deals with the elections. So he tries to really destroy those organisms.
Además, el presidente ha ejercido y ejerce de manera cotidiana la violencia simbólica contra quienes lo critican, no piensan como él, ni le rinden pleitesía.
Well, and of course, he has also a very strong position against those who are critical to them, that do not. How do you say that in English? That say that you're good. Let's say so. Everybody that is critical to he goes boom. This is something that we heard, by the way, guys, already yesterday, no?
Ajá. Por ejemplo, en el campo político tenemos que en las elecciones federales del 2018, ganó el movimiento liderado por el actual presidente y conjuntamente con los partidos asociados logró una mayoría muy importante en ambas cámaras, en la Cámara de Diputados y en la de Senadores.
He basically won the elections in 2008 with a lot of support, and he managed to get majority in both chambers of the legislative power.
En las elecciones intermedias de 2021, esa coalición perdió un número importante de diputados y ganó 71 senadores de 128.
In the midterm elections of 21, he lost many of these members in the Senate and in the deputies, but he got 71 of the 128 places in the parliament.
En 2023, luego de elecciones locales en 2021, 2022 y 2023, el movimiento del presidente y sus aliados ya contaban con 23 de 32 gubernaturas en el país.
After the the local elections that took place in 21, 22, 23, so after 23, the government, the national government, had also control on 23 of the 32 provinces in Mexico. So he controls the governors, the majority of the governors in Mexico.
Y este año va a haber unas macroelecciones donde quedan todavía otras 9 gubernaturas. Que veremos cuáles van a ser los resultados tanto en el Congreso de la Unión como en las gubernaturas.
And we have this year macro elections, and we will see how these 9 provinces that are not in his control will do. We don't know.
Como pueden apreciar, es una gran fuerza política siempre y cuando no haya escisiones y se mantenga una cierta coherencia en las directrices emanadas del gobierno central y una disciplina de los gobiernos locales y de los congresos locales, que no hablamos de eso, pero también hay un fuerte componente de este movimiento y sus aliados, y lo que eso significa justamente en términos de predominancia en el campo político.
Well, we can see here that he has a very strong movement, and as long as there are no divisions inside, or he keeps the discipline of the movement, he controls many of these many levels of this of political power.
En el campo económico, la élite empresarial de gobiernos anteriores sigue siendo básicamente la misma y se ha beneficiado de las obras prioritarias del gobierno federal. tenemos nombres que para ustedes probablemente no signifiquen mucho, o probablemente por lo menos alguno de ellos sí lo conozcan. Carlos Slim.
The economic elite has not changed much with this new government, has been profiting a lot from the government. We have people that names in this elite that for you might not mean anything, but for example, Carlos Slim. By the way, Carlos Slim is one of, I think, he's top 5 richest men in the world at the moment. Is octavo, it's 8, sure. 8. Carlos Slim. Google that name.
Y estos personajes forman parte de lo que desde noviembre de 2018 el presidente anunció como un grupo de empresarios que formarían su consejo asesor para apoyar a su gobierno.
The president announced in 2018 that this elite of people will be part of the advice board for his government.
Probablemente tuvieron ya esta información ayer, pero el informe de Oxfam sobre la desigualdad en México
we didn't have that.
Es bastante ilustrativo, está disponible en internet.
There is a new report from Oxfam about inequality in Mexico.
De las 14 personas clasificadas como ultra ricas de México, según la clasificación de Oxfam, Carlos Slim es el más rico que las otras 13 juntas.
From the 14 more rich people in Mexico, Carlos Slim is richer than the other 13. Together.
Y el más rico no solo de México, sino de toda América Latina y el Caribe.
And he is the richest man in all Latin America and the Caribbean.
Estos son datos de ese informe.
This comes from the Oxfam report.
Su fortuna hasta el día de hoy, o hasta el día en que registró Oxfam estos datos, ha crecido en un 58% en estos años. Y la de Germán Larrea, el segundo lugar en la lista de los ultra ricos, un 125%.
In these years, his wealth has grown 58% of the Carlos Slim, and Larrea, which is I think the second, 125% has increased. So these people have become more richer lately, from 2008 to now.
En días anteriores, hace 1 o 2 días, Slim señaló que en este gobierno no le habían dado realmente muchos contratos, sino una parte nada más de un tramo del tren destructor de la selva maya.
He was complaining a little bit that this new government did not give him much. Only they gave him not many contracts. The only important contract he got is the Tren Maya, which is probably something that you will hear or see, some of you, if you're going to the Yucatan. The Tren Maya is a big mega project crossing great environment for those who are doing environmental harms. Look at the Tren Maya, what is going on.
Datos oficiales muestran justamente que Slim miente como el presidente también. En este gobierno, las empresas de Carlos Slim han recibido 2,530 contratos.
He's lying, basically, because in this government, he received 2,530 contracts.
Equivalentes a 61,000 millones de pesos.
Equivalent to 60,000 million pesos.
A lot of money.
Oh, dollars. A lot of money.
En el campo militar se constata también el empoderamiento de los militares, pilar central de la estrategia de seguridad pública, cuyos resultados en términos de homicidio doloso y otros delitos han sido los peores de la historia del país, y seguramente hablaron de eso ayer y van a hablar mañana también.
Yes. So he's saying it's something that happened, it's something that we heard yesterday, is that in this period, the militaries have become much more powerful in many ways, but that had an impact in violence and in crime. Yes.
Sí, además, los militares han sido beneficiados con un incremento sustantivo de su presupuesto, con contratos para realizar grandes obras públicas del gobierno federal y atribuciones para administrarlas.
Yes, they have had increased budget, more contracts, everything that we heard yesterday about the militaries increasing their power, economic power.
Y tienen el control del espacio aéreo, de aduanas, de puertos y un número importante de aeropuertos del país, entre ellos el de la Ciudad de México.
They have total control on customs, airspace of customs, ports, airports, and a big part of the city of Mexico, you say?
El aeropuerto de la Ciudad de México, el más importante.
The airport of the city of Mexico is...
Es decir, los lugares por donde entran y salen todo tipo de mercancías legales e ilegales, con lo cual se incrementan las probabilidades de corrupción de las Fuerzas Armadas.
So they control all places where goods, legal and illegal, cross. So this increases the possibilities of corruption for the military. So the military control all the places again of entering and going out of commodities, goods.
En el campo delictivo, las organizaciones delictivas en México han proliferado, se han fortalecido, han ampliado sus actividades dentro y fuera del país y han establecido relaciones diferenciadas con el poder político, militar, económico y parte de la sociedad en distintas partes importantes del territorio nacional.
In terms of criminal organizations, they have increased, they are stronger today, they have increased the activities inside Mexico and outside Mexico, and they have also increased their relationship with the political, with the economic, and with the military powers, but also with part of society.
En la clasificación, por ejemplo, del Global Organized Crime Index del 2023, México se encuentra en tercer lugar. El segundo es Colombia y el primero Myanmar.
There is an annual index of organized crime in the world, and Mexico is now number 3. So you have Myanmar number 1, Colombia number 2, Mexico number 3.
Y en 2021 estaba en el cuarto lugar de 193 países.
And in 2021, it was in the 4th place of 194 countries.
Bueno, para no hablar de datos, si hablamos de datos comparativos, por ejemplo, un indicador clave y grave de la inseguridad es el de los homicidios.
Well, I'm going to give you some data also on comparative data on, for example, homicide and homicide rates.
La institución, la organización T-Research International ha hecho un buen trabajo de contabilizar estos homicidios y ahí podemos ver, por ejemplo, en lo que va de esta administración y comparado con gobiernos anteriores, desde el gobierno de Salinas, pasando por el de Zedillo, Fox y Calderón y Peña, los homicidios en esta administración hasta el día de hoy han sido los peores de los que se tenga memoria en la historia del país.
There is this report made by an organization, international, showing that since 2018, if we compare the homicide rates with the governments of Salinas, Zedillo, Calderón, and Peña, the homicides now clearly went up. So we have now an increase in homicides.
Las estadísticas sobre extorsiones y feminicidios, por no hablar de otros delitos, no muestran mejores resultados.
Also, regarding femicides, we have a clear increase in this period than the periods before.
Finalmente, con este panorama breve, optimista,
With this very optimistic and short overview,
podemos hacernos algunas preguntas. Por ejemplo, ¿qué tipo de régimen político se perfila con un presidente que declara en tono intimidatorio contra la Suprema Corte de Justicia de la Nación? Cito textualmente: no me vengan con ese cuento de que la ley es la ley.
Then, under these things that I just told, we can raise some questions. For example, what kind of political regime is coming now with this guy that is saying, for example, to the judiciary power, textually, don't come to me with these issues about law, something like that. Don't come to me about this.
This story that the law is the law.
Yeah, that the law is the law. What is that?
In other words, I am the law. Además, concentra atribuciones, se apoya en los militares y los empodera como ningún otro en la historia del país, mientras la inseguridad sigue siendo una constante.
He is taking more and more power. He is taking. He's trying to get. He empowers the military as never ever again before.
En este gobierno, que muestra aspectos del universo orwelliano de 1984, se desarrollan diariamente ante nuestros ojos las condiciones de posibilidad de varios escenarios probables.
In this Orwellian scenario, we have to see what the conditions developed for the future.
Son escenarios probables si no hay fuerzas democráticas que lo impidan.
If there are no democratic forces that stop that, there is a kind of, Orwellian dystopian future coming.
Varios de estos escenarios ya han sido mencionados por varios analistas. Por ejemplo, un maximato, una autocracia, una persona pelele de los militares en la presidencia, un régimen militar o un híbrido de cogobierno autoritario, político, económico, militar y delictivo, y sus combinaciones posibles en diferentes partes del territorio nacional.
Well, there are several scenarios possible in the future. One is he calls maximat. I don't know what is that. Yeah, maximado.
What's the name of one president in the beginning of the century?
Plutarco Elías Calles.
That his name was Plutarco Elías Calles. When he stopped to be the president, he was the master of puppets of the next three presidents. That is about what we are talking when we say maximatum.
Exactly. Or an autocracy, or an hybrid regime that actually combines military, economic, and political powers, actors.
In different parts.
Or you mentioned also a potential, a possibility of a military
regime.
Yes.
And that's all, folks. Seguimos con el programa. ¿Quién tiene el programa a la mano? ¿Sigue Carlos? Carlos, adelante.
Guys, I'm going to translate everything. I mean, I need to
Muchas gracias, Luis. Pues sí, yo creo, well, you know.
You can talk in English.
Yes, let's go to try. Let's go to try, yes, because, you know, this is, first, I'm very glad for being here and have this exchange of ideas with you. It's going to be a little bit challenging because I didn't know that you don't speak Spanish. And my English might be a little bit rusty because it has been a time since I talk formally in this beautiful language for professional purposes, but nevertheless, let's gonna try to give it. So I was considering showing you a presentation with a lot of names, with a lot of people, that nevertheless is not going to mean anything to you, because probably your historical background in respect to Mexico is not very deep, and that's understandable. So I would like mostly focus on general considerations about how we reached to this point that my friend and Professor Luis Astorga described to you. So, of course, I like to tell you something about what is our theoretical or some assumptions that we follow when we study this kind of topic. The first is that we, as a group of study, try to approach to this issue of organized crime beyond these sort of common ideas about it. So, as Damián told us a couple of minutes before, you are already familiarized as a criminologists, mostly considering organized crime. Well, in the case of organized crime, we like to go beyond those myths that say that organized crime is something different from society, that you have good politicians and police officers combating always organized crime. This becomes something to consider in terms of differences between every case that you study. In some cases, it might be something like that. But when you focus on cases like Mexico, you need to understand that when you say organized crime, you most of the time are talking about something related to corruption. Otherwise, organized crime cannot endure. Otherwise, organized crime might be more fastly controlled. But when you have some situations like in this country that you have this problem for several years, decades, you need to consider what are the kind of actual relationships that are among the actors that are part of this complex matrix that we're talking about. So some of them are certainly politicians, some of them are actually businessmen, and some others are criminals in a traditional sense. But these actors have a specific way of evolving in every different social and political situations, because the kind of state that you have, the kind of political regime that you have, is the sort of structure that conditions these kind of relationships. So the way in which organized crime behaves, for instance, in countries like Colombia, you may say, oh, it's quite similar. Not necessarily. If you study it deeper, you're going to see that there are many differences in many Latin American countries, and you need to focus on every case. How is the social history approach of every case to understand how these groups and how these relationships have evolved, right? So in Mexico, following this kind of methodology, social history of institutional history, which is a branch of political science or sociology, you can follow these procedures that evolved from the very construction of the state. I mean, I understand that the state is not born in a single day. It's a complex process, but if you try to understand these issues following the perspectives of the state, theories of the state that are mostly traditional, like the liberal perspective, you're not going to find something like that in Mexico. Because this civilian pact that is supposedly given the basis for the state formation were not actually present in countries like this. At least in this one, they were not. Formally, they could be, but as a matter of fact, they were not. So you need to try to find some other theory of the state that must be resembling in a better way what happened here. And in my case, the kind of perspective that I developed stems from the perspective of the state, like authors like Charles Tilly. Probably you have heard of him, or probably you have read his work, that says that, as a matter of fact, in his historical dimension, state was not necessarily the product of a civilian pact, but actually the territorial control of a violent faction who was able to monopolize violence, but this monopoly of violence was not necessarily legitimate at the first stage. It eventually managed to become somehow legitimate, but it was mostly to benefit the interests of private groups, this violent group that was able to monopolize state, to monopolize violence, and his economic associates. So when you have this perspective, it's very interesting that Charles Tilly refers to this development, talking about state making like organized crime, because he says that the only difference between a legitimate state and this is that, and a criminal group is that dimension. I mean, this violent group was able to establish a factual control of violence, a monopoly of violence, but not necessarily for a public good, but for a private interest. And it's going to benefit mostly that private interest. So if we consider that institutions are not formed by themselves, but are formed by interests of people, when you have this kind of state, you need to consider also that some of those institutions are, in its very origin, configured to protect those interests. And when the people who was able to monopolize that violence have also interests in illegal issues, in illegal business, they are going to configure those institutions to protect those interests. So it may be that formally you criminalize some activities and even punish some of those who perpetrate them, but at the same time you are protecting others because you have rentist interest on that. So that's the way in which the Mexican matrix between criminals, organized criminals, and politicians, and military men and police officers evolved. And I could prove this with names and historical data, but it will be pointless to show you that because probably it's going to be like a storm of a lot of names that you're not going to connect. But this is what I call hegemonic power networks. Those people that were linked to massive redistribution of social resources, of political resources, in particular moments that are considered critical junctures for state formation, and then with that condition are able to configure those institutions to benefit their interests, and when their interests are also involved with organized crime, are also involved with protecting the rentist perspective or interest, paternalistic interest, then they are going to associate to specific criminal actors who then are going to grow up much more than others. It's very interesting because at the same time that you can arrest a lot of people, at the same time they are protecting others. So eventually to the public, they appear like they are enforcing the rule of law, but at the same time, they are turning an eye blind to the operations of other actors who belong the most powerful ones in the criminal traditional sense of the word. But at the same time, those profits that they obtain are not just to be undertook to debajo de la cama. They are not going to
under the bed.
Under the bed. They are going to invest that money in complex business, high-level business, and eventually, then you're going to have there mixed with this kind of interests also high-profile businessmen, not only casino owners, not only little restaurant owners, but in some cases, you can trace these kind of relationships to very fierce tycoons, very important tycoons in business in Mexico. So what you have here is a situation in which it's very difficult to modify, because when these kind of processes were implemented in an early time of the state formation. In this case, we consider the following years after the Mexican Revolution. They're going to reinforce themselves a long time. They're going to, this kind of people, appointed people within institutions who were protecting their own interests in this kind of perspective of impunity, not actually to prosecute criminals, generally speaking. As I told you, they prosecute some, but at the same time, they protect some others, right? So this was a system that worked centralizedly, in a centralized way, probably until 2000 year, when, as you know, Mexico had a democratic result in its elections, so you have an alternance in power. Nevertheless, these corruption relations that were already present did not disappear. They just dismantled. They did not dismantle, but they was just fragmentized. So you have now different groups that are confronting each other, and these different groups also have connections with state officers, with police officers, with high-ranking politicians, but in a much more chaotic way. So as a result of that, violence has become much more visible, much more más aguda, más deeper. So because now the former conditions in which they were behaving and controlling each other are not present. Now, what you have here in this moment is certainly a mixture of an intention of rebuild a sort of authoritarian regime, as Luis Astorga mentioned, but at the same time, we are also witnessing a condition in which you don't have now the kind of functioning that regime had in the past that actually made it able to control this kind of situation. Because, for example, currently you have the National Guard displayed in the full country, and at the same time, violence is not decreasing. You have the armed forces displayed along the full country, and nothing is changing. So you may say some you may hypothesize some different scenarios. For instance, you don't know if you have here a situation in which the kind of relationships of power actors are resembling those that we had in the past. When you see, for instance, that in Sinaloa, a state that has been most of the time ruled by or eventually in some positions, local positions by PAN. Some days before the last election, pre-official was kidnapped, and then in the following day, the result is an electoral trend that de que castigó, digamos, a la fuerza política a la que pertenecía, punished the former political force that he was representing. You can say, well, that is not an action directly conducted by organized crime just by themselves. That should be something in connection with political powers. So then you may ask if something like that is happening in several regions of the country. That's an hypothesis. I'm not affirming anything, but that's a reasonable hypothesis. But you can also consider how actually disciplined and strong are the institutions of the country themselves, because it's rather incredible that you didn't have, well, you have already a very strong participation of military forces in public security, but never as strong as they are doing it right now, not in terms of a strategy. You cannot actually distinguish or understand a factual strategy currently, but they are displayed along the country. They have many more functions than they had in the past. But at the same time, anything changes. So you say, okay, the commander of the military zone doesn't know who are the principal actors where they are operating. The commander of the National Guard in that specific zone don't know who is performing crime activities there. It's very hard to consider that they could not they don't know that. So you puedes hipotetizar, ahí sí voy a solicitar ayuda, puedes hipotetizar dos cosas.
So
puedes hipotetizar
hypothesis two things.
Puedes hipotetizar dos cosas. Que la propia estructura de seguridad en México está ya tan fragmentada, is so fragmented, que no puedes, digamos, también garantizar que lo que se decida en la cúpula se lleve a cabo en las regiones.
So one hypothesis is that the security apparatus is so fragmented that they cannot guarantee to actually apply what on top is being said.
Y eso no por disciplina ni por relación formal, sino porque la corrupción también está muy amplia. Esa es una hipótesis. Que hay tanta corrupción que entonces cada comandante de zona, cada personaje pues tiene sus propios intereses y entonces la información siempre se filtra, nunca los detienen, nunca los ubican, detienen laboratorios y no arrestan a nadie.
So corruption is so extended at local level in these fragmented scenarios that actually they never really are able even to detain people or to dismantle laboratories or whatever.
O la otra posibilidad hipotética es que de veras tengas una delincuencia organizada tan poderosa que sea capaz, digamos, de doblar el brazo al Estado, pero yo soy escéptico respecto a ese último escenario.
The other hypothesis is that we have such a powerful organized crime that is able to twist the arm of the state, but I am a little bit pessimistic about that second hypothesis. So I don't think, he doesn't think that the hypothesis that is very, very powerful organized crime that is able to transmit. So it's more the first hypothesis, no, about the fragmentation
Exactly.
of the security apparatus.
Because consideren, por ejemplo, que algún caso que podríamos, digamos, traer a comentario para analizar una circunstancia semejante.
I would like to come with a case, a concrete case to talk about this.
De las últimas organizaciones grandes, más confrontacionales, más crueles, por así decirlo, era la organización de los Zetas.
From the last big organizations that we had here, the most cruel, the most powerful, that was the Zetas.
El núcleo central de los Zetas estaba conformada por desertores de fuerzas especiales del ejército mexicano. Entonces,
the nucleus of the Zetas was formed by security forces of the state.
¿sí? Fuerzas especiales capacitados para guerra irregular.
Special forces.
El equivalente a Green Beret, something like that en México. ¿sí? Entonces, esta capacidad, digamos, armada de este grupo, el hecho de que tuvieran este tipo de entrenamiento, this former military background of this group allowed them to display themselves to the full country and to take, arrebatar, to grab territories from other groups because of this violent capacity. When some of these, of the actors who belong to this group decided to kidnap and kill the son of a former governor of one of the northern states of Mexico, 2 weeks after this, the very head of Los Zetas, Heriberto Lascano, was apparently killed. The very top guy of the Zetas. So this sends a message that says that when we as armed forces want to touch you, we can reach you. You're not beyond our grab of our hand. So if they could do something like this with the most fearful guy, then what happened in those other states where crime, atrocity after atrocity happens, and they only patrol the state, and eventually they don't dismantle criminal organizations, because that is another issue. The attorney office that were expected to become a strong pillar for the state of law, por el Estado de Derecho en México, pues ha sido también muy deficitaria. Digamos, no ha tenido una actividad que realmente, digamos, se enfoque a desmantelar redes criminales. Básicamente, pues da algunas acciones, pero vean ustedes en los juicios, prácticamente todas las causas penales se les caen.
All the cases by these forces that try to preserve the state of law, etc., are flooded. They never really get anything. So it's more they are not capable to really dismantle these organizations.
Y estas redes, en buena medida, digamos, sus principales actores, no desde el ámbito delictivo tradicional, sino desde el ámbito empresarial y político, están intactas.
And these networks, not so much at on the criminal side, but more economic, political side, they are intact.
Y los criminales en un sentido tradicional son reemplazados, son, digamos, el eslabón que estos otros grupos que les dan protección más fácilmente pueden reemplazar.
And the traditional criminals are the ones that are being replaced all the time, easily.
Entonces, eso te explica, cuando tú analizas ese tipo de cosas con su evolución histórica, te explica el nivel de impunidad que tenemos. Un nivel de impunidad del 98%. O sea, eso significa que de 100 personas que se relacionen o hagan alguna actividad delictiva, 98% muy probablemente no tengan ningún problema con la ley.
Well, he comes back to this number of 98% of impunity. So from 100 people that commit crimes, 98 can do that without any kind of reaction to that.
Porque justamente instituciones fragmentadas donde distintos comandantes, distintos jefes protegen a distintas organizaciones, donde distintos políticos están involucrados con distintas organizaciones, te refiere, digamos, a una situación que tiene un nivel de caos hasta cierto nivel.
So we have here a landscape in which we have a fragmented, very, very fragmented security landscape which deals with criminals, also fragmented, and this is a kind of chaos situation. They are not able to yeah.
Pero un caos hasta cierto nivel, porque vean ustedes, si uno analiza, por ejemplo, la violencia de organizaciones criminales hacia actores de poder en México y la compara, por ejemplo, con el caso colombiano.
Chaos to a certain extent, because if we compare the violence of these groups to particular powerful people in comparison with Colombia, for example.
Tú puedes ver que, por ejemplo, en el caso colombiano, Pablo Escobar, digamos, asesinó candidatos presidenciales, asesinó senadores, asesinó jueces, asesinó ministros.
We can see, for example, in the case of Colombia, that Pablo Escobar was able to kill president candidates, judges, policemen, very successful in killing really people of the state.
Aquí tienes una violencia hacia políticos, sí, presente, pero solamente hasta alcaldes, a candidatos a alcaldes, a candidatos a diputados locales, y muy rara vez escala a esferas superiores.
But here, the violence is the highest you can go is really a municipal level. They kill municipal level, local level, but you hardly see cases in which they are able to kill really top politicians, for example.
Si consideras ese tipo de factor con el otro caso que les ejemplificaba con los Zetas, cuando asesinan o matan, digamos, a uno a la cabeza de los Zetas, pues te habla de que ese caos sigue sin lastimar los intereses profundos de esa red y que esas redes siguen operando.
So when you, for example, also put that together with the case I just told you about the Zetas, you can see that how the real powers are able to continue working without being challenged, let's say.
Y a pesar, por supuesto, que al ciudadano de a pie, pues ese sí lo lastima mucho en su vida cotidiana. Entonces, esa es una de las tragedias que tiene México, que hay una impunidad, digamos, rampante, donde pues, los actores prácticamente siguen intocados y que en la medida que está enlazada con las condiciones que formaron el Estado y que no se atienden en esa perspectiva tan compleja, sino solamente con políticas parciales, pues no tienen para cuándo acabar.
So that's the tragedy of Mexico, that this violence touches really the persons on the street and the, you know, the normal people, but the high actors are untouched or remain untouched of this violence. And that is a little bit the idea, no? Yeah.
Así es. Sí,
Yeah.
sí.
Okay, that was it.
Gracias.
Gracias, Carlos.
Vamos a Carlos. ¿Entendés? ¿Y por qué no lo pones aquí el ordenador?
Ya. Bueno, pasamos ahora a la presentación de César Alarcón.
No quieren hacer un proceso. No quieren hacer un proceso. 5 minutos. Okay.
No, y bueno, no sé, tenemos que terminar y hacemos para ir en un proceso, somos 4 después. No, no. Creo que no. Sí, vamos. Oh, yeah.
Hi.
After the presentation, we're going to make a break.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I will try to make a brief presentation because I just will wait. My presentation was talk about the organizational dimension of drug trafficking organizations in Mexico. Yeah, organization, but there is not another form to explain the high levels of complexity about the one kind of illegal market and the different branches that that kind of illegal market can develop at the social level. So the title of my presentation was the organizational dimension of drug trafficking and in Mexico, an archaeological analysis about organized crime groups that born in Sinaloa, is a little state in this country. So this I will try to start with a brief critique about Palermo Convention of 2000. And this is why, because we have in that treaty, in the body of that treaty, we have a lot of missing parts. That is legal text that is used to make juridical arrangements between different kind of governments, but there is not explicative level so about so many different parts that is that are in the game of the construction of illegal activities, groups, and spaces. So I'm gonna focus my presentation in 3 main critiques. I can do a lot of more critics about it, but it is not the issue. Originally, I was thinking about explain you the Sinaloa case, but I am not going to do that. I am just going to concentrate my presentation about theoretical issues that can be more useful and interesting for you. So, first things, when you read the body of the treaty, you can see that ¿me puedes pasar, por favor, la hoja? La hoja. Yeah. There is not, in the body of the treaty, there is not a definition of transnational organized crime. That is fantastic. It's a treaty about transnational organized crime that don't define it. The definition that exists there is about organized crime group, no more nor less. The word, it's important to see the words. Every word is a factor, is a way of thinking. So in this level, I just think about the labeling approach effect. The authorities of each country do with that definition what they want. And that is a huge level of flexibility that you can use that word and that juridical concept for one thing or another thing or another thing. You can put whatever you want there. So that's the first level of critics about this. The second level is about the main characteristic of organized crime groups. There is three mains. You know, the number, at least 3 people, and so on and so on. Well, there's a blurred definition of time. How much time is some time? When you see the law, you see, but sometimes, yeah, how much time is some time? And the 3, they call about the articulation and people and action that I call them as an interpretative openness effect. So the third level is about lack of clarity in the law about what means organization in crime. What means? How can you connect the dots? So I know the value of a law like this, but for me, it's a different levels of interpretation that make me think we need more investigation about this. And with the exemplification of our cases of national or regional or even with specific illegal market experiences, we can see and we can document different kind of variations about it. And that is why it's important to be in places like this and to have this kind of interchanges with different experiences. So that last level I call a blurred structuration effect. Well, that has been said. I'm gonna show you a brief of each one, a brief points of each one. The labeling approach affects some basic neutralizations. Okay, in Mexico, the notion, not the concept, is that there's a huge difference between a notion and a concept. A notion is a general idea. A concept is a different level of theorization about it. And when you have a legal theorization that is incorporated in the code and in the juridical codes of the states, you have a different power effects. And you can see, you have to see that kind of things when you make any kind of evaluation about the illegal market activities. Well, in Mexico, the notion of organized crime appears in the Constitution of 1993, but only as a notion. There is not a definition what is organized crime. Yeah, well, in the Constitution said, we have to fight against organized crime. Okay, yes. And what is organized crime? Well, that is one interesting interesting thing that we have to see. The second thing about this labeling approach, we have to see also that in Mexico, the legal concept about this kind of particular figure is ratified in the federal law or federal law against organized crime in 1996, 4 years before the Palermo Convention. So you can see in this sense that is a concept that is in a recent incorporation of juridical law, Mexican law. Well, and this is why I have to do two main questions. Before the legal codification of organized crime, the groups did not organize. So the second question is, in the body of the law, how this kind of particular illegal activities was called. Well, in Mexico, the legal codification about that was gang activity. So that's interesting. Well, according to the presentation that I made a few minutes ago, I only gonna show you the three principal issues that are specific, que están, a ver, se me está olvidando, que están especificados en la ley.
So they are the criteria that are on the law.
On the law, okay, that's it. Time, groups, and associations, right? Time. The history of drug trafficking in Mexico is a history of more than 100 years. The first treaties about it are established in 1940, the Harrison Narcotics Act about drugs in general. The second one was the Volstead Act. With that law, U.S. authorities start to see the Mexican behavior about different kind of organizational development about this issue. The second question that we have to consider about it is there are different merchandises in this long history. Originally, the Mexican drug trafficking groups started to work with marijuana and heroin and opium. Later on, in the 60s, 70s, was cocaine. Later on, when methamphetamine. Later on, fentanyl. Each one of these substances has different routes, different kind of articulations, different kind of authorities involved, different kinds of so on and so on. Marijuana and heroin was produced locally, cocaine not. Colombian drug trafficking organizations are starts to make presence here with a different kind of relation with the local authorities and with the local drug trafficking groups. So according to this, you have to see that the spatial distribution, spatial distribution of the groups, of the activities, of the substances is with a huge level of heterogeneity. When we see the group reference, we see that the number, the 3, well, since the beginning was over that little number, right? In a huge horizontal, in a huge time lapse, we can see that enormous different levels of organization that the groups have development in this country. And the third, and when we speak about the drug trafficking issue, we have about 3 main core process: production, traffic, and distribution. Each one of that has different routes. So that's another thing that we have to see. Third, the members of these groups has developed the different kinds of relation with the territory and with the people that live there. Only theory. Last thing, associations. Well, one of the main things that we have to consider about the drug trafficking organizations, organized crime groups, is something in 3 different levels. Different kind of relation with authorities, with different kind of relations with illegal organizations, groups from another countries, and different kind of organization with domestic groups. And there is a plethora of different kind of relations. With authorities, you just hear about it with intervention with of Carlos. Well, the different routes about the main concept that is kind of mantra, corruption, corruption, corruption. Yeah, it's corruption, but we have to make investigation, more solid investigations about it, and we have to see that there are different directions about this relation with the authorities. It can be top down or bottom up. So the second thing is about the relation with another groups from foreign origins. That kind of relation generally are about the kind of are conditioned by the kind of substances that are traded between them. And the third level, and there is another level of complexity, has to be about the relation with the territory and the authorities and the illegal markets beyond that drug trafficking market. So when we speak about the organizational level of this kind of things, there are a lot of different issues that we have to see. In the presentation, when, well, then the last thing about these theoretical issues, the blurry structuration effect. According to organizational theory, I was thinking about to explain you in three different levels. Organizations are collectivities in action. Organization must be adapted to the environment or they disappear. Or 3, the social spaces are product of different organizational ecologies. I'm not going to explain the Sinaloa case because it's gonna take to me a lot of time. So I'm gonna pass to the conclusions because it's important. It's only about I only show you the presentation is about the state of Sinaloa, the way of the physical distribution according activities, physical distribution according connectivity, rivers, and the political division of the state. Well, the main thing here is we have to see that it is an agrarian state. But I don't gonna stop there. I just try to go to the conclusions. In the presentation, I was showing to you the different kind of organizations since the beginning of the century of these groups with Chinese, with Italian, with different nationalities, but I am not going to stop about. Well, some of them, as a lay family, are prominent businessmen today, Chinese origin. Wait.
The Chinese market also in the...
Yeah. Well, the political protection network, the different integrants, the core points in that illegal network, well, in that protection network, some of the key figures of the beginning of the century in drug trafficking in the state of Sinaloa, and some of them was closely related with the political field. Integrants. This is the smoking gun. This is a former governor of Sinaloa, and one of the main drug trafficking kingpins until that time, Miguel Ángel Félix Gallardo, and they were together, and they were, ¿cómo se dice compadres? Compadre, okay. They were compadres. The superposition of different kind of protection networks, and in different levels. In this is local level, and in this is national level, the same people. Well, and that is the starting point to see the different organizational branches of the groups that start to trafficking with drugs, but with the different kind of developments in the, according to the merchandise, according to different kind of geographies, according to the border states, but most of them are from Sinaloa state. So I am going to end. The main conclusion, there is a huge importance to think about the relation space organized crime activities. Second, we have to see this process in the long-term view. Three, the organizational theory is very useful to see this kind of trajectories. Four, the drug trafficking phenomenon is transgenerational. And last, about the specific issue in the Sinaloa state, there are a different kind of organization that compose an ecosystem that we have to see with more precise lens. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, César. Pasamos a la presentación de Ángela y luego sí vamos a tener un intermedio.
So what we decided is actually that we finish the presentation here and then we go for a break and then we do the right questions, etc.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, if we do it now, she will be like, you know, with the Dutch presentations, it doesn't really make sense. So let's bear for some minutes the presentation.
Voy a tratar de ser muy breve.
Yeah. I'm going to try to be short.
Y voy a necesitar su ayuda.
Okay, and we are going to translate again.
Bueno, buenas tardes. Vamos a hacer un gran giro, porque vamos a dejar de hablar de toda la escena más de la delincuencia organizada y hablar un poco de qué ha cambiado en términos de política de drogas específicamente en torno a la marihuana.
We're going to make a big turn because we're going not to talk about organized crime anymore, but we're going to focus back to what we yesterday had a little bit. It's on the focus on cannabis, particularly on drug policies.
Okay. Esta primera lámina les muestra una línea del tiempo, son poco más de 20 años, que dan cuenta de cuándo empezaron las movilizaciones a favor de la marihuana en México, en 2001.
This is the timeline of the marijuana movement started in 2001.
Empiezan en 2001 las movilizaciones, fueron muy poco concurridas, muy poca gente se atrevía a salir a la calle, llegaron 10 personas a la primera movilización.
First mobilization were 10 people. No one really dared to really go to the streets to talk or show about marijuana. Yes.
¿Yo? Ah.
No.
Ok, el movimiento canábico trató de impulsar cambios por la vía legislativa. Desde 2007 se presentaron las primeras iniciativas de ley.
The cannabis movement tried to change things from 2007, particularly on the judicial line. They tried to really go through the judicial line.
A través del poder legislativo, ¿no? De cambios legales.
Legales, sorry,
legales,
legislativos,
sí.
no judicial, I'm sorry, legislative.
This is after. Ok, entonces empezaron tratando de que en el Congreso, senadores, diputados, impulsaran proyectos de ley para cambiar la prohibición, pero esto no se logró.
So clearly they tried to push senators in the Congress to push law change, but they didn't really change anything.
Como esto no sucedía, en 2015 empezó todo un proceso de litigio estratégico y se interpuso un procedimiento legal que se llama amparo en México.
Because this didn't work, then in 2015 they started a new strategy, which was litigation, strategic litigation, creating this, using this juridical form of the amparo.
Es una forma de buscar que se respeten los derechos, ¿no? Como un mecanismo.
It's an instrument that allows it's a mechanism that allows for people to claim that their laws, that their rights are being respected.
Yes.
Of themselves.
Okay. Pero esto ya no fue impulsado por el movimiento canábico, ¿no? Ya quienes interpusieron estos recursos fueron otras personas, y esto es lo interesante.
But these amparos were not put by the cannabis movement, but individual people or other people.
Ok, hubo otros cambios legales, no me voy a referir a ellos, porque lo que me interesa es que en 2019, después de que se acumularon 5 amparos, se estableció que era legal la prohibición de la marihuana, que estaba contenida en una ley, la Ley General de Salud.
There were some changes, legal changes, but the important thing is that in 2019, after 5 amparos, the judicial actually said that it was legal, the prohibition of cannabis.
Así es. Después de esto, lo que hace el tribunal, la Suprema Corte, es pedir que el Congreso legisle, que el Congreso establezca una regulación acorde a lo que ha establecido, pero el Congreso no lo hace. No lo hace en 2019, no lo ha hecho hasta ahora.
In 2019, the Supreme Court pushes the legislative power to really pass a law regulating cannabis, but the legislative power does not do it.
Ok, como no lo hacía el Poder Legislativo, en 2021 la Suprema Corte hizo un pronunciamiento que se llama Declaratoria General de Inconstitucionalidad, ¿no?
So, because the legislative power did not do anything, on 2021, the Supreme Court came with this, declare inconstitutional the prohibition.
Entonces, digamos, por la interpretación de la Suprema Corte, que es el Tribunal Constitucional, ya no son inconstitucionales los artículos de las leyes que prohíben, o de la Ley General de Salud que prohíbe la siembra, la producción, etcétera, de la marihuana. Pero como el legislativo no ha regulado, estamos en un limbo.
So basically, we heard this story in the first day. Okay. The Supreme Court declared that is inconstitutional and is declared that these articles are inconstitutional, no, but the legislative has not moved any finger on this, so nothing has happened.
Y en la parte inferior está, bueno, el proceso de movilización, ¿no? Fueron marchas canábicas, para el 2019 llegaron al Zócalo, seguramente ya estuvieron en el Zócalo, es muy importante llegar ahí para quienes están reclamando algo. lo cual quiere decir que el movimiento había crecido mucho, pero no logró incidir por la vía que esperaba y se empezaron a dar cambios por esa otra vía.
So in the lower level here, we see the mobilization on cannabis. We see that in 2019, they made it to the Zócalo, meaning that that was important because not you don't go to the Zócalo as a mobilization as easy. So that was it. But yeah, but that's
para presionar a los legisladores, hubo grupos que se instalaron frente al Senado, pusieron matas de marihuana y establecieron que iban a fumar ahí como una manera de impulsar que se cambiara la ley.
They installed also plantón in the Senate. They with the plants, and they were going to just cultivate there in the front of the Senate until they passed this.
Eso no sucedió.
Really
el año pasado se retiró el plantón y bueno, hay otros puntos que han tratado de tomar, pero ya no con esa fuerza, ¿no? De estar frente al Senado.
Yeah, 2023 they retreated from there because they failed.
Ok, esto un poco para entender que si había movilizaciones de consumidores a favor de un cambio legal, pero no fue por la vía que se dio el cambio legal. Fue a través de la Suprema Corte, ¿no? Entonces, y a través de litigio estratégico.
So here the channel was the Supreme Court and the strategic litigation. That was the main route.
Ok, y aquí lo interesante es justo que este litigio estratégico se lo ha denominado un activismo de élite para la movilización legal. Ustedes pueden ver, Damián, no sé si quiere.
Yeah, no, that this kind of strategic litigation strategy was called some kind of elite activism.
No sé si quiere leer el párrafo azul.
Okay, this it says why should we litigate cannabis and try to change the law, basically for the violent situation in the country, but we don't. Quejoso.
Es el que reclama, quien busca ampararse.
Yeah, well, we didn't have people complaining. Yeah, okay. Let me read it first and then I'll translate. Okay, we didn't have this kind of complaint that society was going to sympathize with. In general, Mexicans, as housewives, do not really empathize with hippies that are smoking marijuana.
Ok, estas son palabras del abogado que llevó el primer caso ante la Suprema Corte de Justicia de la Nación.
These are words of the lawyer that brought the first case to the...
No tenía sentido querer representar a marihuanos, hippies marihuanos, entonces hicieron algo distinto, representaron a gente de bien, como este señor que es de México Unido.
Yeah. The strategy of these lawyers were not to represent these hippies because they were not going to gain social support for that, but to represent good people, basically.
Decent people.
Decent people, like this one.
Si quiere puede leerlo. ¿Eso también son palabras del abogado?
Yeah, which is, by the way, the book where we were yesterday. Yeah, so this is the ideal client. They were not going to generate any rejection from society when this guy was going to say that he is a model citizen and sometimes he also wants to smoke a joint.
Ok, entonces efectivamente estas personas incluso no fumaban marihuana, ¿no? Pero decidieron que había que tratar de hacer algo, ¿no? Y entonces esto es lo interesante, que no fue el movimiento canábico.
So there was not the cannabis movement that did it, but these people that were hardly smoking marijuana, this guy, for example. So they used these people to push. Yeah.
Ok, ¿por qué fue posible este proceso? Luis Astorga al comienzo habló justo de cómo el Poder Judicial fue ganando independencia, ¿no? A finales del siglo XX.
Well, how did this process started? Luis referred to how the judicial system regained some autonomy, actually, at the end of the 20th century with the dismantling of the pre-regime.
Y se convirtió en un verdadero tribunal constitucional y empezó a impulsar cada vez más una agenda de derechos.
And then we had this creation of the increased power of this constitutional tribunal that started to be seen as a body that pushed rights.
The agenda
of rights, yes.
Ok. Entonces, la Corte empezó a retomar jurisprudencia de tribunales internacionales y todo el andamiaje internacional de derechos humanos y a incorporar nuevos derechos.
Yes, and of course, all this judicial power, these judicial courts started to also take a lot of the jurisprudence from abroad, particularly human rights jurisprudence, to incorporate it into this.
La Corte por esta vía introdujo un derecho que es el derecho al libre desarrollo de la personalidad.
And they actually, it was a new right that they incorporated, which was the right to the free development of personality. Very important right that they incorporated as a new right, the right of the development of personality.
Free development.
Free development of your personality.
Y esto es importante porque este fue uno de los derechos que en este proceso de litigio estratégico se invocó. Se estaba violando el derecho al libre.
They used this argument that these laws were violating this right, and they used that in this strategic litigation.
Ok, entonces, ya para cerrar, justo que quiero ser muy corta, quiero mencionarles que este derecho ha sido invocado para proteger a personas vulnerables como personas con discapacidad, derechos de las mujeres, derechos sexuales y reproductivos de las mujeres, personas de la comunidad LGBTIQ+, incluidas las infancias transgénero.
Okay, and then I just want to be closing a little bit, to end, is that I want to just stress that this right has been used not only in this issue of cannabis, but also in other litigation related with LGBT movement, women rights, reproductive rights, what other groups? People with disabilities.
And LGBTIQ+.
And LGBT, yes. So it was a full range of groups that were starting to use this particular right in their litigation.
Y entonces este es un derecho que no está en la Constitución como tal, sino que se deriva del derecho a la dignidad que sí está en la Constitución y que fue introducido por la Suprema Corte de Justicia. Por eso es tan importante entender que no fue por la vía legislativa, sino por la vía judicial que se dio este proceso.
This right is not really in the Constitution, but it derives from another right in the Constitution, which is the right to dignity. So in the Constitution, you have right to dignity, and they make from there this right, and this is why they are not using the law or the legislative framework, but the judicial framework to actually push forward these agendas.
Bueno, para terminar, pues que todavía no podemos saber cuál ha sido todo el impacto en términos sociales y sociológicos, ¿no?, de este proceso, porque este derecho, el derecho al libre desarrollo de la personalidad, se ha dado a conocer masivamente en la sociedad mexicana como el derecho que ampara el consumo de marihuana.
To close, basically, we cannot yet see which will going to be the end of this story, because the Mexican society has just learned that this about this right, and which is the right that actually protects the people that smokes marijuana.
Okay, un ejemplo muy rápido. Yo soy profesora de estudiantes de licenciatura en los 20 años, y hace 5 años no sabían que existía ese derecho.
Just to give you an example, I am professor of in the bachelor level, and my students 5 years ago did not know that this right existed.
Pero hoy, cuando les pregunto a los estudiantes de mi curso de Estado, Sociedad y Derecho, ya lo conocen.
But today, all the students know about this right, and this is a course called State and Rights. No, what is the name of the course? State and Rights. Yes.
Ok, gracias. Algo un poco ya para terminar ahora sí, es que en una revisión de las notas sobre el Tribunal Constitucional en los medios nacionales más importantes, la mayoría de las notas referidas al tribunal eran también referidas a la sentencia sobre marihuana, es decir, el Poder Judicial se asoció, ¿no? Se lo vinculó en los medios con esta sentencia.
And also we see that this right has been massively linked to the issue of cannabis, in 63% of the cases.
Las noticias eran sobre marihuana.
The news. So in the news, in the media, there was this connection between these rights and the marijuana.
That's all.
Okay. So guys, I suggest we make a break now. And you prepare the questions for any of the 4 speakers of today, and then we continue, and then we go further with the other presentations. I became like a... Luis. but there are a lot of people listening here in YouTube. This is being transmitted in YouTube, so there are a lot of questions also maybe from the from inside. So the floor for people to ask questions to all the presentations.
I think my question will be to Cesar, but maybe it's not. Thank you for the interesting presentation. In comparison to legal economy, how big is criminal economy and shadow economy in Mexico in terms of profit, in terms of employees?
Yeah. Let's keep it the questions and the answers short so we can. Yeah, sorry.
Well, how big is big? No, you know, there are different forms of this particular issue, because, of course, at the end of the day, the mainstream economy always gonna be bigger than the shadow economy, but that doesn't mean that the shadow economy is not something that you have to see to make different kind of evaluations about it. So it's not necessarily about the money; it's about the political effects that going with that come with illegal economies, with the different effects of power in the micro level. That is the main thing that you have to see, and you have to understand that a different amount of money have different kind of effects according the kind of society that you have, that you are seeing. So,
as far as I know, there is not precise or actually. As far as I know, there is not actually a precise cipher of shallow economy. This has a reason, because this is clandestine. But nevertheless, there are some information about the money that some international organizations measure that may come from whatever. I mean, it's not clear if it comes from money laundering, but it's a remnant that is a difference of what you can measure in terms of official production in Mexico and what is that remnant. And this is considerable. I don't have currently the cipher, but nevertheless, I would like to point that, in fact, the most concerning issue is that you don't have here a shallow business that is completely disconnected with formal economy. Sometimes they connect directly. Sometimes a person that are the owners of an important business, that the infrastructure of that business is used for trafficking, for instance. You have trailers of companies that have been several times seized by police officers, and nevertheless, el Consejo de Administración, the Council of Executives, and ¿cómo se diría? El Consejo de Accionistas, el Consejo de Administración. The owners of the company don't do anything to change that, and after many events of that, you then reasonably start to think, okay, they don't know what is going on with their infrastructure of their business or what. So it's not only an issue that you have a parallel economy. It is the question that you have an economy that is a process in which it feeds back actually the formal economy.
I just would say that if you compare what I said about the fortune of Carlos Slim, it's a legal business, and he's the richest man among the 14 mega rich in Mexico. So if you try to compare the fortune of Carlos Slim with all the illegal trafficking, traffics in Mexico, it's useless, you know. So there's no, well, I don't know any study about what is the impact of the illegal economy in Mexico in comparison. What percentage of the GNP in Mexico is the illegal business? So it's more speculations about. There's no data, no. How do you say, hard data?
Yeah, there's no hard data.
Hard data about it.
Yes, I have a. Oh, she left. Oh, I have a question for Angela. Oh, sorry, I wasn't. Oh, I'm sorry. So I was wondering, there seems to be a bit of a dichotomy between, on one hand, this focus on the argument of developing personality or identity, but then at the same time, the people that they're pushing forward in the movement are these ideal citizens. How do you kind of reconcile these two arguments alongside each other?
¿Ya está prendido? Bueno, es una pregunta interesante. Justo las sentencias de la Suprema Corte no cuestionaron la estigmatización y la prohibición. Espero haber comprendido bien la pregunta, ¿no? Que cómo se reconcilian esas dos posturas, ¿no? O la relación con estas quienes...
I understand it. Yes, please.
So on one hand, the documentation talks about how there's a lot of attention for the argument of developing your own personality or identity, but then the people that they are being pushed forward within the activism and the movement are these ideal citizens. So you wouldn't really associate them with the identity of a cannabis user. So those two arguments don't really seem to make sense alongside each other.
Sí, había entendido entonces. Sí, justo las consumidores, las personas consumidores del movimiento canábico, pues se han apoderado del derecho al libre desarrollo de la personalidad, lo han hecho suyo, ¿no? Y lo invocan, incluso cuando no estaba, pues, incluso aunque la sentencia haya sido hecha sin dar cuenta de los procesos de estigmatización y sin un poco hacer eco de esas demandas de derechos que venían haciendo desde hace tanto tiempo.
So the movement, the cannabis movement, the marijuana smokers have taken for themselves this right, despite the fact that the Supreme Court ruling is not really recognizing anything about, for example, the stigmatization processes and all the things about this. So the Supreme Court is not really talking to the marijuana smokers, but to this ideal citizen. That is the dissociation in a way. It's not at the level of the smokers themselves, but it's at the level of the ruling, in which you see that they are not really addressing the uses of marijuana as a kind of subculture or as a kind of group that has been pushed aside.
Y las personas consumidoras pues están usando el camino, este camino para que les permitan consumir. No sé si ayer en México Unido contra la Delincuencia hablaron de esto, ¿no? Que tienen que pedir tienen que ir a una entidad que se llama COFEPRIS, que es una oficina, ¿no? Y pedir permiso para poder cultivar y fumar, cada persona, ¿no?
So yes, we talked about yesterday, but basically the people have to go through a very bureaucratic process to ask for permission to cultivate and to smoke for themselves.
Pero es un permiso individual, entonces. es muy difícil que haya un cambio general por esta vía, y lo cierto es que a las personas las siguen deteniendo por posesión simple de marihuana, porque ese delito no se ha modificado, y que sigue la estigmatización. El mismo presidente tiene en sus mañaneras, en sus alocuciones, palabras, ha dicho cosas contra la gente que consume, ¿no? Los ha asociado con la violencia.
The truth is that the possession of marijuana is still criminalized, and also the president in his radio, the president has a radio program every morning called Mañaneras.
TV program.
TV, sorry, not radio, TV. TV, and he's openly talking against these people that smoke marijuana, so there is a clear dissociation between
Sí, tal vez lo que hablábamos ahora en el intermedio, o sea, el presidente tenía la capacidad política para impulsar el cambio, pero no quiso hacerlo, teniendo la mayoría en el Congreso, porque no está a favor del cambio, ¿no? Entonces, no se ha hecho así.
The president had the opportunity and had the power, because it had the majority in the Senate to really pass the laws, but he didn't want to do it, and it's clearly that he's against it.
Pero bueno, la gente se ha apropiado del derecho y la gente siente que puede cada vez reclamar sus derechos. Los usuarios se han venido metiendo, ¿no?, dentro de eso, y eso también es muy interesante, ¿no? Y es algo que todavía que estamos estudiando, ¿no? Pero en los barrios populares la gente dice, tenemos derecho al libre desarrollo de la personalidad.
But at the level of the people have internet.
I have a question about the so-called successes of law enforcement. For example, the whole case of El Chapo and arrest, and what impact does it have? You say nothing is changing, but what impact does it have on the structure of criminal organization, on people awareness of possibility of these successes? What does it mean to them?
Thank you. Well, as a matter of fact, this is very interesting because we could consider this issue in respect or compare it to the Sisyphus myth. So you can try to, I mean, not you, but generally speaking, everybody can try to make an evaluation of how efficient or effective is the effort of Sisyphus pushing a rock, right? And this is how the body system evaluates itself. It's autoreferential. But after following up this kind of perspective of kingpin strategy, just this, not dismantling a network, just capturing the head of that organization, actually doesn't have an impact. I mean, we have witnessed several decades of this kind of strategy, and it doesn't have an impact. You replace, you arrest some of these men, and some other grows up. The question is how he grows up. Eventually, he's not growing up just because he's smart or anything like that, because he's growing up because this network of corruption, of impunity, allows him to grow up. Most of the time, those who are actually growing a lot within that kind of structure is because of that. He's the kind of guy who has the blessing of specific actors who allow him to become what he becomes to be. But it's a sort of policy that eventually acts like a garden keeper who just cuts the tips, but the garden is the same. The garden is still functioning. Because, as a matter of fact, when we study these strategies along history, we see that they are mostly focusing on administering a business, not actually dismantling it. And this is not just an issue of Mexico, but internationally speaking, it works like that.
think maybe one question more, and then we continue with
sure.
Isabel.
Does this work? Yeah. Yeah, Carlos, I have a question for you again. I'm so sorry. But you mentioned the Pablo Escobar and how his organization used violence against state actors. But what happened with continuing with El Chapo? What I read from the news, when El Chapo's son was arrested, the Sinaloa cartel committed violence against state authorities, and then they released El Chapo's son. So could you expand on that?
Oh, that's it. Thank you. I was saying that, yes, generally speaking, I was talking in that sense, but certainly there are some groups that may be more prone to violence than others. Newer generations seem to be more prone than violence than others in that specific network that we have been calling Sinaloa organizations or whatever, which is more like some sort of cooperative structure than actually a single organization. But nevertheless, that taking for granted that though some of them may operate a response against the state, eventually no higher official was killed as a result of that when the Chapo's son was actually arrested. So again, for instance, when the United States started to mention them as connected with fentanyl trafficking, they tried to reduce that exposition, saying that no, they were not something like that they were not dealing with that. I mean, currently in Mexico, you don't have the kind of violence, for no organizations can have this or exert the kind of violence that you witnessed in Colombia during the 1980s. Yes, they can target a single official. But if you consider, for instance, the trends, generally speaking, that have been happening since 2000, 2008, you may consider, where is Arturo Beltrán Leiva? He's dead. Where is Alaska? He's dead. Nevertheless, you cannot say the same in respect to those actors who have been totally mentioned as linked to them within the side of the government or within the side of yes, businessman. Thank you.
Yeah. So we're giving now we prepare for the people that is listening and for you guys some presentations. We will try to be short, trying to show what is going on in the Netherlands. So basically, we are going to do some kind of historical presentations. So Isabel will start telling us something about the epidemics of heroin in the 70s. Then Michelle will focus more on organized crime today and the groups there, and I will talk about cocaine trafficking in the ports of the Netherlands, which is in Belgium, which is a big thing. So I would give the floor to Isabel. The floor is yours, Isabel.
Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Isabel, for those who don't know. And I'm going to be talking today about the heroin epidemic in Amsterdam in the 1970s. It's not completely a random point in time that I chose to talk about. It's actually quite an important time because it was this specific moment in history that led to what we call today het gedoogbeleid, which is the Dutch word for our tolerancy policy towards drugs that we have, towards cannabis at least. So yeah. I should also mention that on the background, I didn't choose this randomly either. This is a picture of the Vondelpark, which is Amsterdam's most central and famous park. And during the 1970s, this was a really common site where people would come to Amsterdam to use drugs. and stay in the park for multiple nights in a row, basically only sleeping in sleeping bags. So, yeah. So this is what I'll talk briefly about today. I'll start off with an introduction. I'll talk a little bit about where the drugs came from, the Golden Triangle. I'll talk about the organized crime groups that were settled in Amsterdam that were kind of responsible for the heroin trade. I will then go to Amsterdam and really look at what the situation there was that led to, well, that was a good ground for this heroin epidemic to unfold here. And then I will talk about a little bit about the reactions to this heroin epidemic, and then I will conclude. So Amsterdam in this time, in the 1960s and 1970s, was really considered a drug paradise. You can arguably say that it still is in some ways. And it was really seen as a recreational kind of thing. So it wasn't considered to be criminal, wasn't considered to be problematic, until heroin came to the market. And that really changed the game. So much so that we suddenly had no-go zones in Amsterdam, which, as a person who lives in Amsterdam, that to me seems pretty crazy now, because it's so orderly and like you could just never imagine that that would happen, but it did. And it was especially around the Zeedijk, which is kind of Chinatown in Amsterdam. And when I did this research, I kind of asked the question, a research question, if you will, what socio-political factors on both a national and international level led to the heroin epidemic in Amsterdam in the 1970s? So let's first look at the international level. So where did these drugs come from? Well, they came from the Golden Triangle, which I think we're all pretty familiar with as criminologists. It's an area in Southeast Asia. You can see it covers Myanmar, the kind of little part of China, Thailand, and Laos. And opium, which is, what do you call it, a precursor for heroin, was made here because it was the right climate, it was the right soil, but it was also the right kind of socio-political situation because there was a strong sense of lawlessness in this kind of mountainous region, and there was little state interference. And then especially after World War II, the opium production really ramped up here. And that also had to do with the fact that there was a communist takeover in China in 1949, I believe. So basically the anti-communist party or army took to this part of the Golden Triangle and really took over production to fund their army, basically, their anti-communist army. So another part that made this region very interesting was that Vietnam is obviously right next door, and the Vietnam War happened, and this really created a really new and strong market for American soldiers that became very addicted to opium and heroin. So then, basically, when the Vietnam War came to an end, and the Americans kind of pulled away, and they went back to America, they suddenly the organized crime groups that were in the Golden Triangle and in Hong Kong as well that were selling these drugs had to find a new market because the war on drugs was happening under Nixon in America, and America cut off opium trade routes from this area. And at the same time, in Europe, Turkey had been a big producer of opium, but France and the United States, the DEA, worked together to cut off basically the opium trade there. So there was a new market in Europe available as well. I linked this, just to theorize a little bit, I linked this to the illegal enterprise theory, which states that just because supply is cut off doesn't mean that demand stops, which means that another organized crime group will just come in and take over this supply chain, basically. And then the ports of Rotterdam and Amsterdam were actually perfectly located to be the new distribution center in Europe for opium and heroin. And it was also good because the Chinese communities were already settled in here, which is then linked to kind of the social embeddedness theory, which means that for organized crime to take place, social embeddedness is really important. Organized crime doesn't happen in a vacuum. It interacts with its environment, basically. And these Chinese communities were already settled and really embedded in the fabric of our society already in the Netherlands. So then what organized crime group did we have in Amsterdam? Well, we had the 14K Triad, which is part of the Chichao network that spanned from Hong Kong all over the world. That is basically, I'll show you a little map. They came from the Guangdong region. And when the communist takeover happened, they basically, this Chichao network went to the Golden Triangle, then went to Hong Kong, but they also have the diaspora in Singapore, for example. And we had a man called Chang Mon in Amsterdam, who was later dubbed the godfather of Amsterdam. And he then became a member of the 14K and took over the heroin trade in Amsterdam. Their modus operandi was they smuggled it in via the ports and via planes. Via the ports was already happening because the Chinese were already smuggling opium in through the ports. So the trade routes were basically already set up. But then Chang Mon was shot dead in 1973. And then basically the Alarcón triad took over, and they were a part of the same Chichao network. Their diaspora was in Singapore. And yes, they killed Chang Mon, they took over, and their modus operandi was much the same. They used the ports and they also used planes, but they didn't fly it directly into Amsterdam. They flew it into Scandinavian cities and brought the heroin to Amsterdam from there. Once in Amsterdam, they had nothing to do with the heroin trade. They left that completely over to Surinamese immigrants, who then became the dealers, but they also were a good market for new addicts. So then, focusing on Amsterdam, what were the socio-political precursors as such that made Amsterdam a good city for this to happen in? Well, there was an American army base in West Germany. And as I said previously, there were a lot of addicted American soldiers. So there was basically a strong market for heroin demand close to Amsterdam. And they came to Amsterdam regularly to indulge in heroin, as you saw on the photo on the first slide. They came for a whole weekend to indulge in drugs and forget about everything, basically. Then we also had Suriname, which was a former Dutch colony, which became independent in 1975. And they came to the Netherlands for economic reasons, visa reasons. But they had a really tough time integrating into society straight away. And so they were very marginalized and thus were a very easy target to become dealers and subsequently addicts as well. Then there was also our cultural climate in the 1960s and 1970s. It was very anti-authoritarian. It was kind of a hippie culture. And drug use was very tolerated. As I said before, it wasn't really considered a problem, a criminal problem. It was seen as something recreational. And if someone got addicted, then it was really seen as a public health issue, more so. Now, to the reactions. There was really a lack of response from law enforcement, as they initially took a very tolerant approach, a public health approach to the drug use, which is why it just kind of evolved and evolved and evolved without really much interference. However, that kind of stopped when heroin became a problem in other European countries as well, and then increased scrutiny. The Netherlands was increasingly scrutinized by these countries when this drug epidemic really got out of hand, which then led to the Pompidou group, which was basically a group that focused on drug legislation with multiple kind of representatives of European countries in it. And there was really a pressure on the Dutch to basically act tougher on drugs. But us Dutchies didn't really want to do that. We really wanted to stay kind of on our public health approach. We were definitely very adamant to stay kind of tolerant towards cannabis. So this was a really pivotal time, actually, in Dutch history, because it did ultimately end in the amendment of the Opium Act in 1976, which then made a distinction between soft and hard drugs. So this really was the start of the Dutch gedoogbeleid. So we saw cannabis as a soft drug, which was to be tolerated, as we still see today. We have coffee shops and everything, which don't sell coffee, and hard drugs. So really heroin, cocaine, LSD, name it, amphetamines. So yeah, that was a really key kind of point in this time. And what it did was that after this, law enforcement suddenly and the criminal justice system gave top priority to fighting hard drugs. So suddenly heroin was really bad, and and it was linked to organized crime, and it needs to be fought. But arguably for this heroin epidemic specifically, this was simply too late, as the kind of the damage of this addiction had already been done. So yes, I went through that very quickly. So then to just come back to this kind of leading question that I had, which was what socio-political factors on both the national and international level led to the heroin epidemic in Amsterdam in the 1970s. Well, on an international level, the Golden Triangle and organized crime groups were simply in need of a new market, and then were in need of a lucrative market where a lot of money was to be spent. At a more local, national level, there was embeddedness of these Chinese communities already in Amsterdam. And of course, there were Americans in West Germany, there were Surinamese immigrants as dealers, and there was a strong anti-authoritarian culture of the 60s and 70s, which made drug use just very lucrative. And simply the government in this time just did too little, too late, really. So yeah, that was it.
Okay, let's move directly to Mtro.
I think
oh my God.
I can find it.
Oh, I don't want to see that. No.
Yeah, true. So hello, welcome everyone. My name is Michel, and I'm going to talk about organized crime in the Netherlands. I'm going to take it away where Isabel kind of left it here, with first Klaas Bruinsma in the 1980s. Then I will go into more a current topic, the Mocha Mafia, and I will go deeper into the Mocha Mafia with Ridwan Taghi and the Marengo trial. So first, Klaas Bruinsma. He was one of the persons who really was able to profit from het gedoogbeleid, which Isabel explained. Close. He started selling drugs when he was around 14, 15 years old, and he was kicked out of high school while he actually was a very bright student. He became a big millionaire in his mid-20s already through the import of hash and distributing and selling in the Netherlands and other countries around the Netherlands. His modus operandi was he had very good contacts in countries as, for example, Morocco and Pakistan. In those countries, it was actually kind of legal to grow cannabis. So there was a lot of cannabis grown there, and from the mountains in those countries, they have made mule trains, and mule trains were actually big rows of mules who took the drugs from the mountains to the beaches. And once at the beaches, the drugs was loaded onto small dinghies, which are like small vessels. And afterwards, they were moved to bigger boats, and those boats went to the Netherlands. And then little speedboats actually went to those bigger boats again to put in to get it into the Netherlands. And the hash was stashed in just normal houses and garages over there, because it was a lot less suspicious when it's just in a normal house instead of a big warehouse where everything is together. And what we see is Klaas Bruinsma really, in the end of the 1980s, he really wanted to make one last big job, which he actually called the Big Mountain. And this was one of, well, probably the biggest hash import ever. There was about 45,000 kilos of hash from Pakistan, which was transported to the Netherlands. And he actually succeeded in getting it into the Netherlands. However, once stashed in a warehouse, the police found out that there was a lot of hash there, and they intercepted it. And this was also actually one of the start of Bruinsma's downfall, because afterwards, well, he was already known for being a very big drug user and alcohol abuser. And after the transport went kind of wrong, he started using a lot more. And around the same time, an article about him was published in Parool, which is a Dutch newspaper, which said son of big Dutch conglomerates, is the head of the Dutch crime, organized crime. And after the police, got to know that there actually was an organized crime problem in the Netherlands, they created the IRT. And the IRT is an interregional detective team consisting of people from Utrecht and people from Amsterdam. And there were dozens of police agents in there, and they really wanted to try to catch Klaas Bruinsma. However, they never succeeded in this. And in 1991, Bruinsma was actually murdered in front of the Hilton Hotel in Amsterdam by a former police agent called Martin Hoogland. And this meant the end of Bruinsma. However, his organization didn't really stop. The organization just kept going. And we see other people after him, like Stanley Hilles, which was also very big in the drugs. And also Willem Holleder, who's also famous from the Heineken kidnapping. He actually kidnapped the owner of Heineken, the beer company, and made a lot of money with it, but eventually was captured and afterwards became one of the biggest in organized crime in the Netherlands. So now I want to take a step more to this time into the 2010s, which was the start of the Mokro Mafia. And one of the first, maybe the first big leader of the Mokro Mafia was Gwinnett Matta. And he was importing a lot of drugs and distributing in the Netherlands, selling it and making a lot of money out of this. But at some point, around 200 kilos of cocaine was stolen in the port of Antwerp. And they believed it to be a group which were uithalers. And uithalers are people who go into these big sea containers in the ports, and they need to get the cocaine out of it to give to the person who ordered it. And 200 kilos of cocaine was stolen. And something had to happen, and this showed a big change in violence in the Netherlands, because actually some kind of a coke war broke out. And we saw that the first person was murdered in 2012, and eventually Gwinnett Matta himself was also murdered, which was in 2014. And the murder of Gwinnett Matta was also the start of Ridwan Taghi. Ridwan Taghi is what can currently be said the biggest person in organized crime in the Netherlands. He was born in Morocco and moved to the Netherlands in 1980, very close to Utrecht. He was a very bright student, but he dropped out of high school to go into the hash business. And we see that in his youth, he joined the Utrechtse criminal group, which was called the Bad Boys. And the Bad Boys was a group which was focused on robberies, small drug dealings, and other petty crimes, most of it. But afterwards, with the fall of Gwinnett Matta, there was a big power vacuum, and Taghi was able to profit from this. And he became, the most wanted criminal in the Netherlands, and also one of the biggest, most wanted criminals in Europe. So how was Taghi able to rise? He started selling hash at a very young age and already had some contacts. But one of the most important things was that his family was also already in the hash business. And Taghi was able to use the family hash importing lines to actually push a lot of cocaine through the same lines. And together with the vacuum left by Matta, Taghi was able to become very rich in a very short time span. And he used his wealth to become the biggest criminal of organized crime in the Netherlands. So we see that the structure of his organization, we see his right and left hand man, which are Said Razouki and Mao Er. Taghi was the person who was in charge. We see him at the top here. And the other two did most of the things that he ordered. And a lot of other people were underneath him as well. And Razouki and Mao Er, they made sure that the drugs is distributed. They also were in charge of some of the hit squads. And one of those hit squads we see on the right here, which is Kalawago. And Kalawago is a motorcycle gang, which was used by Taghi to have multiple people killed in the drug scene, but also outside of the drug scene. And the Dutch police system, they believe there is some kind of super cartel going on, which is together with Rico R, the Chilean, which he was born in Chile, but he moved to a very young age to the Netherlands and lived in Amsterdam and became a typical Amsterdam street kid involved in petty crimes first and later into the drug business as well. And we see in the middle is Naufal F, also called Noffel, and he was a very ruthless criminal. And he actually executed a lot of the hits that Taghi ordered. And what we also see is that Naufal Nauval F. He was actually arrested in Dublin in a safe house of the Kinahan clan, which is a very big clan in Ireland. So we see that all of these different crime groups actually kind of work together as well. And on the right here, we see Raffaele Imperiale. And he was, well, they believe that Imperiale is one of the biggest suppliers for drugs for Taghi, because it's said that Taghi doesn't himself have the right contacts with cartels in South America. And that's why they use Imperiale, because he actually does have those contacts. He used to be a former Camorra member, but he wasn't really aligned to a specific clan, and he more supplies drugs to all different kind of Camorra clans. And that he did the same for Ridwan Taghi. And there was also a big crime conference where all of these people came together in Dubai, together with Taghi and other leaders of criminal crime gangs. And they just talked about what they were going to do with the drugs business in Europe, and they just controlled the whole industry. So Taghi used mostly 2 hit squads, and the first one was called 26 Koper, which was consisted mostly of his criminal youth friends from the Bad Boys. And we see that most of the people in this group are actually arrested or murdered, and a few of them are actually, the hits for the murder of them actually executed by Taghi himself, because at some points there were a few mistake murders in which they killed the wrong person, and Taghi was always a person, if something goes wrong, someone needs to pay for it. So you see a lot of those people get murdered as well. And as I mentioned before, Kalawago, which was the motorcycle gang, and it was led by Delano R. And Delano R was the founder of the Crips in The Hague, and which was also a crime group which was very linked, or they wanted to kind of copy the Crips in the US, and they did kind of similar crimes. And we also see Greg R., which was kind of an advisor, but also a leader of the group. And he is also called the Godfather of the Netherlands. And actually, they also murdered a lot of people, and there is a separate trial made for them, which is called the Eris trial. So the downfall of Taghi, it's can arguably be said that it started with Ibrahim Bouzou, who went to the police, and he wanted to make a complaint about Taghi because he was afraid that Taghi was going to kill him. And this was actually the first time that Dutch police knew that Taghi was actually alive. And Bouzou explained the whole organization, who were in there, what was important. And a year later, we see that another person, Nabil Bey, who was inside the organization of Taghi, he became a crown witness after he was involved in a mistake murder. And the person who actually got killed was one of the good friends of Nabil Bey, and he was scared that or the family of the killed person or Ridwan Taghi was going to kill him. So he went to the police and just explained everything what happened, every murder which he was inside. And we see that eventually it leads to the arrest in 2019 of Taghi in Dubai. And together with the testimonies of the crown witness and the police being able to decipher the Encro chats. And the Encro chats was kind of a secret chat service in which a lot of criminals used. And they thought they were able to just talk about everything secretly. But the police cracked it, and they just saw everything what they were saying, just listening to all of their conversations. And these chats were called PGP chats, which actually stands for pretty good privacy chats. What's kind of funny because it's, well, not so pretty good eventually. And here's a picture of the 2 trials. And we see in which Taghi is the key figure. And we see the Marengo trial. There are a few murders in there already, but some are still missing. And this trial is going on in the Netherlands at the moment. And we also see on the other side is the Iris trial. And this is a trial which I just talked about with the Kalawago group, which is also suspected of a few murders and also some murders which went wrong. Well, some of the murders that really sprang out is the murder of the spy shop owner of Ronald Bakker. They suspected that he was delivering bad technology to Taghi, and he was talking to the police, which was both not true. And eventually he got murdered. And we see a clear modus operandi in his murder. He was observed by the spotters, And the spotters just looked at him for a few months, just everything he does, all of the routes he takes from his work and leaving. And afterwards, there was a group which were the hitters, and the spotters just gave all the information to the hitters, and the hitters eventually killed Ronald Bacca. And another murder is from Martin Koch, and we see the picture over here is actually a murder. Well, they tried to murder him, but it went wrong. You see in this, there is a video about it. You see that a person just walks up to Martin Koch and tries to shoot him in the back of his head, but the gun jammed. And later that evening, he still eventually got murdered. And one of the biggest, one of the murders which was a very big shock in the Netherlands was the murder of Redouan Bey in 2018, which was the brother of the Crown Witness. And this has never happened before in the Netherlands. And it also shows a big change in violence from criminals killing each other to a criminal group who also focuses people who are not involved in crime at all. And the same is with the murder of the Crown Witness's lawyer with Dirk Wiersum in 2019. And this was actually the moment that the police were like, okay, we're done with it. They really upscaled all of their efforts. And well, this eventually led to the capture of Taghi as well in 2019. And 2 years later, we also see a murder of Peter R. de Vries. He was a crime journalist in the Netherlands, very famous. He was also a person who said he never wanted protection from organized crime. And eventually, well, he got murdered in 2029, which is also included now in the Marengo trial. One thing that really springs out from the trial itself are also the lawyers of Ridwan Taghi. First, we see Yusuf Taghi, which is his cousin, which was also his lawyer. And which is, well, kind of a bit weird actually already. And during the meetings, they talked about escape plans. Taghi communicated to Yusuf everything that he wanted his organized crime group to know. So it just keeps his operation going. And eventually the police found out and Yusuf got a 5.5-year jail sentence. And last year, we actually saw that his other lawyer, Ines Wesky, who was a famous criminal lawyer in the Netherlands, she also got arrested because she's also suspected of communicating between Taghi and this group. She was in very big contact with Taghi, his son, who is suspected of running the criminal crime group now. And but she was released later last year, but she's still a suspect in the case. So for the conclusions about organized crime in the Netherlands, we see that there is actually kind of an ongoing problem. There's always one leader is getting killed or arrested, and a new leader stands up, as we see with Bruinsma, who's being followed up by Holleder, followed up by Matta, and now, well, we have Ridwan Taghi. And Ridwan Taghi actually led to the biggest trial in the Netherlands that we have now, the Marengo trial. And in 2 weeks, the trial judgment is coming out. People expect that he's going to get a life sentence, and the other people in his criminal group are probably going to get very high sentences as well. Well, this was what I had to say.
Sit here. And then I go to. Yeah. A ver, ¿cómo es esto? Pásame, ponémelo. In the meantime, it's very interesting to see that we are talking about criminals and they are talking about the state. So the idea that the Netherlands is a narco state is a kind of ridiculous, no? The presentations of Mexicans show really that because there is a whole discussion in the Netherlands about are we a narco state now that we have so much trafficking and so much crime, but still it's about criminals. It's not about the state much there yet. Anyway, so some of you know some of this story, but for many, it's something new. First of all, it's strange for me to be talking sitting. It's something new for me. I would like to tell you a little bit. I'm going to talk in English, but I have the presentation in Spanish, so you can follow it there. And this presentation comes from a research that I'm doing now, following cocaine trafficking from South America to Europe mainly as an effect of the war on drugs. As we say, you cut the things, but the thing keeps growing. There's a lot of, I would say, since 2016, big shipments coming from Bolivia, Peru, via Paraguay and Argentina through the hydroway, the Paraná-Paraguay hydroway. This is where I'm researching now. I spent some months there talking to people, visiting ports. These big shipments are going to mainly north of Europe, and in less to Germany, Italy, and Portugal. But we see there the big shipments being taken in the north of Europe, not anymore in Spain, as we can see. Some cases to Africa, but mainly 80% in containers to the northern ports, so Amberes, Rotterdam, and Hamburg. So today I would like to tell you a little bit more about what is going on in Rotterdam and in Antwerp, which have become the main receptors of cocaine coming to there. We have 3 record ever shipments coming from this route. In the middle of the pandemic, 16 tons were seized in Hamburg, together with 7 tons in Antwerp, 23 tons being confiscated from this route, mainly in agro things or industrial things. There has been a change. This is before I start. There has been a big change in the ways in which cocaine enters Europe. As you can see, and if you look at 2006 until 2006, 2007, half of the cocaine were coming through Spain. Portugal had a moment in which a lot of came from there, but then started to decline. And then what we see is that if you look at 2019, let's say, again, 60%, 70% of the cocaine comes through Belgium and the Netherlands. These are 2 very small countries, but they have these big ports receiving cocaine. So cocaine comes to Europe, I would say 80% in these 3 countries, Spain, Belgium, and the Netherlands. So this is something to take in consideration. Why? I see 3 factors that explain the expansion in Europe. I mean, the confiscations have almost tripled in the last years. We have on the one hand expanding demand, so not so big, but the double, let's say, than years ago, particularly after the crisis of 2008, particularly after COVID. So no, they are not losing popularity. Prices are still stable. Different sectors are using cocaine, and people that use cocaine use more cocaine. So the quantities of cocaine that people use are larger. Then what we also have an important factor that explains why cocaine is so popular in Europe is the fragmentation, internationalization, and diversification of these networks of import-export. So we have more European networks. I wouldn't call it cartels or whatever, networks, like you said, more like cooperations in Latin America. When I started researching this 20 years ago, it were more Latin Americans there trying to get the stuff. Nowadays, we see in many countries, in the South, particularly in the South America, a lot of, again, networks, Italy, South Europe, of course, the Dutch, getting there and organizing the operations to the Netherlands. So that it explains that. That is a very important factor that makes it happen. And the third factor is the containerization of the cocaine. So the container has become, the mules are done, are over. All the 80% or more of the cocaine comes in bigger shipments, more shipments, but bigger shipments. So again, 3 tons is not anymore a big shipment. We see nowadays in all these countries a lot of big and more integration with the legal economy. I would claim that it's not the integration with the state or with the political structures, but with the economy. If you want to make a case about narco something in the Netherlands, it's a narco economy, not a narco state. It's really an integration with the economy. Well, this, I would call them white ports in the sense of ports attracting cocaine. I have several characteristics, very important. So I talk to you guys because these people know a little bit my story. First of all, these are ports that have mega terminals of cocaine. Mega terminals of containers. Many lines, many companies, both going and coming from Latin America. So this is important to understand. Why Hamburg or why Rotterdam is because they trade with Latin America massively, more than ports in Spain. They are automatized, very important. So no people anymore in the terminals. Everything is controlled from consoles. So corruption is not anymore of people working there, but is people that are able to put a container either in the 10th floor or or down. They are also very connected, these ports, so you can change them very easily. This is important to understand also mobility of cocaine from one port to the other, is that there is a connection between these ports. So a shipment might stop in Rotterdam, in Hamburg, so it's like a kind of stop bus in a way. These also ports have all of them a kind of tension between this problem of more control and more efficiency. The more control you put, the less efficient it becomes. So there is this contradiction, this paradox that you need to, and of course, all the economic powers want these ports to be quick and no control or less control. Then, of course, interesting is the paradox in both of these ports, the paradox of the tension between securitization and corruption. The more secure they become, the more corrupt they become, because you need more people inside to make the thing. So there is this paradox of, again, more secure ports does not mean less corrupt ports, usually means more corrupt ports. And finally, also, all these ports, I've been talking a lot with the people in these ports, is that they are very much, they don't trust really, or they have a very limited cooperation with the ports of departure. Usually they all rely on intelligence of US, UK, and in the European Union. They do not share much information with ports in Latin America, although they always say that they do, but they don't. Rotterdam. So let's go to Rotterdam. Rotterdam moves 35,000 containers a day. 30,000 containers a day in and out, meaning that you can, and remember that all the cocaine that we use in the world for 1 year, you can put it in maybe 6-7 containers, full containers. And so we are talking about trying to find very, very small little thing in a huge volume of containers coming in and out. Highly digitalized, highly automatized, and the last 10 years, highly securitized. And so it's kind of there is even a digital twin then of the port made. I mean, it's a kind of almost a video game. And cameras everywhere, and also receiving a lot of cocaine all the time. We have, for example, the record 8 tons in bananas. Ecuador, 1/3 of the cocaine we receive in these ports comes from Ecuador at the moment, particularly in bananas, which is linked to the companies of the brother of the president of Ecuador, which is connected with that, etc., etc. So there I see connection there, and as here. But basically, Ecuador is now at the moment the main exporter of cocaine, coming from crossing the Panama Canal to the north part of South America. Yes, different modalities of smuggling, but basically 45%, I would say, they come what we call contaminated, meaning they call gancho ciego, they call it also in Colombia, is basically you open the container, you put the cocaine there, you close it with a new sale, and you tell the people there which is it, and the whole thing is an operation of opening the container and extracting the cocaine. And the other half is integrated in the emergencies. For that, you need, of course, to have export-import companies. You really need to put the cocaine into that. But it's 50-50 at the moment, the two modalities that are being used. We also see in Rotterdam growing corruption and also growing levels of facilitators internally. There have been cases of custom corruption. There have been cases of, for example, companies having a lot of people working in these companies being involved. They have a project called Integer Port. In my view, is not really living much or getting much. We also have very interesting for the Mexicans this use of Trojan, the Trojan method. The Trojan method is you put a container with people, with young people that you recruited in cities there as a kind of open container, as if it's with nothing. In the night they go out, they go to the containers where the cocaine is there, and they extract the cocaine from the containers. These are youngsters that are being recruited, very vulnerable people, but they have been found, for example, these containers where people are sleeping for a couple of days in the container until they get the operation in. So it's like a Trojan horse. We also have seen, and this is something that Michelle has clearly exposed with all these killings, new forms of violence. I wouldn't claim that there is more violence. I've been researching the number of liquidations, and it's not really growing much. But the new types of violence, for example, killing lawyers, killing journalists, this is new in the Netherlands, definitely. Violence that is touching the public opinion. A lot of threats, and very interesting, I live in a neighborhood where I hear, I would say once a week, a big explosion going on. So there has been a lot of explosions. You can see the map of the explosions in the city of Rotterdam, basically using heavy firework, not even grenades. It's really like heavy fireworks. No people dead, but a lot being used for pressing in the business. So there are a lot of this. This is a new phenomenon, the explosions in the cities being used by narco traffickers or by other criminals. We really don't know. We need to do more research on these explosions. Another interesting development in Rotterdam is that they have been confiscating laboratories a lot. You can see the laboratories confiscated in 2022. The blue ones are synthetic drugs. These are our laboratories, the old traditional laboratories, but you see the red color of cocaine laboratories. So the coca base is going as coca base, and then in the laboratories they are oxygenated and finalized as chlorhydrate. So we have started to produce chlorhydrate there in the Netherlands, and there has been many cases like this. We have a presence of and confiscation. An increase of in the commission, and in size of chemical precursors to produce. So this is something that has been in growing. There has been some attempts to deal with this problem in Rotterdam, in the sense that, for example, what we call a multi-agency approach. So many organizations working together to tackle this, cooperation public-private, something that is unthinkable here. I mean, the cooperation of public-private here is to commit the crimes. We have there some kind of attempts to deal with that in tables where all the companies and the public and police are sitting and trying to get something like that. Some attempts to name and shame some companies, for example, Maersk, showing that in the media, some in symbolic operations, a lot of symbolic operations too, showing that they are doing things, efectistas. We have this is the Burmeister of Rotterdam, showing that he's heading the war on drugs, etc. But since 2014, most of the cocaine does not come through the biggest port, which is Rotterdam, but to a smaller port, relatively closer, which is Antwerp in Belgium. It has separated. You can see the statistics here. The cocaine confiscated in Antwerp has surpassed even the double in 2022 than in Rotterdam. So it's almost as big as Rotterdam. It's only 120 kilometers from there. One of their, I mean, there are many reasons why Antwerp, but one of the things I find out is that, for example, from Brazil, which is the number, it used to be the #1 exporter of cocaine to Europe, and now Ecuador has surpassed, but Brazil still remains the most important exporter of cocaine, or one importer. It has a lot of lines of containers to Antwerp. So if you want to follow the cocaine, you have to follow the lines of the legal goods. So you have to study, where are the bananas going? Where are the things, where are the companies trading with whom? So this is what we see a lot. They fuse with another big, so they became bigger. It's a little bit more open than Rotterdam. There are corruption possibilities still related also with the political system there. Is more, yeah, they regard themselves a little bit as a mafia, more mafioso than the Netherlands in a way. But yeah, there are more things. By the way, the important thing to understand is that most of the shipments coming to Antwerp are really for the Netherlands. So the Netherlands and the networks that Michelle described are operating. The other port, even if it's another country, but doesn't matter, is very, very close. So there has been now formed police groups dealing precisely with that movement, with the movement of cocaine coming from Antwerp to the Netherlands. Also, a lot of violence there. And it has really ideal conditions for displacement of cocaine from one port to the other. To finalize, I would like to finish with a couple of reflections about this movement of cocaine in these ports. I would like to argue that all these incautations and this seizure of cocaine, actually, when you have in Europe a demand that's stable or growing, in fact, reproduce or even dynamize production of cocaine. So the more you confiscate, the more has to be produced for the market. In fact, it's not that it's more produced and then we confiscate more, but I would say that they have increased the capabilities of confiscation, so they have to produce more. So the only thing that these in confiscations take is more production as a result. Or, sorry, and then the other point I would like to bring is that in even with more operations and with more size numbers, we are not affecting the demand. The demand is not affecting, is growing. So we are better in the ports, but we are still not touching the demand. These are classic cases of adaptation and displacement of that we are seeing here, the cocaine going from Rotterdam to Antwerp. First, for example, another case is Ecuador, a very good example of displacement. The hydrovia that I'm researching is a very good example of displacement. And in Europe, we see Spain, Rotterdam, Antwerp as a good case of displacement. You hit here, and then it moves to another place. And finally, my other argument is that these incautations not only increase production, but also increase violence, particularly in Latin America, in the places where the things are done. So interventions that only look for kilos and for detentions actually not only augment the violence, and so I would say that we should move to some kind of approach that tries to minimize risks, minimize harm, and decrease violence rather than focus on kilos and focus on detentions. All the intervention should be done in order to diminish, for example, the violence, again, that Michelle has described, and maybe to neutralize some of the violent actors, etc. Thank you. Maybe we have some final questions for either the three of us or for them, guys, because you might be interested still to ask some questions about Mexico.
Can I start a discussion? Because it's not a question, it's just a problem. In the Netherlands, we are talking now about the image of Netherlands as a narco state. When we listen to you, Mexico is a narco state. Do you see us as narco state as well, from your perspective, from what you've heard now?
I do the difference between a label and a concept. So narco state is not a concept of the social sciences. It's just a mediatic label. So if we are going to repeat as researchers in social sciences the labels that media adore, I don't think we are doing our job. So narco comes from the beginning of the 20th century with the Harrison Narcotics Tax Act that included cocaine and opium and derivatives as narcotic drugs. So there's the first problem is how you label different drugs like cocaine and opium as narcotic. So, and then how do you impose, as for example, the United States, that error, and how other countries adopt that error in their own laws? When you say, for example, in the Mexican law that all the drugs are narcotics, it's stupid. From the pharmacological point of view, it's stupid. So we cannot continue. That's my argument. We cannot continue as social researchers to repeat those kind of nonsense and try to baptize them as concept in the social sciences, things that they are not, So I don't think there's even we don't. I don't think we don't have to stop in arguing if there is a narco state or not. Instead, we have to discuss why that kind of prefix is so widespread and misunderstood, and the sociogenesis, as Norbert Elias would say, of the word, and how it is imposed to other countries, and how they adopt this kind of error. For me, it's more important to do that to label whatever state as narco or whatever.
Yeah, unfortunately, in the Netherlands, we have also researchers who are promoting this image as well, or using this narco state in their
Professors.
I think it's a shame. It's a shame that the labels of the media are adopted by scholars without an epistemological reflection.
No, can I add some? Go. Yeah. I wanted to add something. Yes, I think it's important indeed. You to discuss if it's or not depends on how do you define it. I mean, but the important thing is to see what is the agenda behind those who put it's not a concept, it's the label out there. It's not only scientific people, it's the police, it's the mayor of Amsterdam, it's many people there. You know, what is the agenda behind that attempt to push the label? That is what we have to ask ourselves, I think. And I see, interestingly enough, that is being used both by those who want more war on drugs, but also by those who now want to legalize drugs. Because the argument is we are becoming now a narco state, so we need to legalize. You have seen the major conference that are just taking place in Amsterdam, historical, with political mayors from Cape Town, Bogota, Bern, Prague, Amsterdam. They all have bought this label as a way of justify also the thing. So what I see is that the agenda behind the narco state concept is divided between the fighters with more repression and those who really say, because we are now a narco state, we need to legalize. And this is a very paradoxical and interesting thing.
Yes, I think we have to attack different levels of language, and I agree with you. There's an agenda, but if we don't start with the label itself, I don't think we're going to go further.
Yeah,
you know.
No, I agree.
Thank you, Luis. Yes, it's very interesting because one thing is to wonder or to try to establish a research question in respect to say, namely, how deeply are the roots of links between public officials or politicians in different cases, for instance, the Netherlands or some countries in Latin America, and something very different is this kind of label. Nevertheless, when we consider, for instance, what I was talking about before, that when you have many years, many decades of a specific approach to these issues that have not rendered any actual result to diminish it, then an option is to start considering what parallel agenda is reached or supported with this kind of approaches. Because consider what you were talking about, that the most that you say is drugs, the most they are produced, is very interesting, because when we consider that, for instance, in respect to other issues, for instance, that you have the bigger production of cocaine in Colombia when Plan Colombia was implemented, that you have the biggest pollution of opium in Afghanistan when it was invaded, then you say, okay, it's quite interesting. And when you say, when those actual factors of power that are pushing toward a stronger war on drugs, it's interesting that to see that they sometimes are the same, yeah, who are also supposedly implementing that kind of policies. Yeah. That's deep state politics, probably, but it exists, right? So in this case, well, yes, it's interesting that the extremes touch each other. One trying to liberate those substances, and the other one trying to push forth to stronger control measures. So that was I was talking about, that at the end, probably you become very cynical because you end up saying, okay, this is just a sort of administration of a business that is also important for other agendas beyond health, beyond victims, but it's also oils a complex machinery of bureaucracies, of selling weapons, of private consulting in security issues. It's very interesting, yeah.
More questions? We need to finish, no? Yeah, okay.
Sí, creo que tenemos hambre y creo que desde hace tiempo, desde hace media hora o más, nos cortaron la transmisión, ¿o no? Tenemos que terminar, nos están diciendo ya de la cabina de control. Y bueno, como siempre, as always in this kind of reunions, there are a lot of things that we don't discuss, and there are a lot of questions that are not being answered. But I think you're going to have a very wide scope of what we think and what we think is happening and has happened in Mexico, as we know now that with your presentations on the Netherlands, what kind of problems you have had and what kind of problems you still have and what problems are beginning to grow, as, for example, violence, as you mentioned. We have to thank you all for assisting to this Conversatorio. And well, we hope you have a very nice staying in Mexico. And thank you very much.
No,
all of you.
Sorry, I would like to thank you guys for organizing this for us. I mean, for us, it's an opportunity to see real experts telling us about these topics, but also to see the biggest campus of Latin America and the biggest university in Latin America. So.
Really appreciate it. Makes our trip so much more special. We brought you waffles. I'm not Dutch, so but they're really good. So you can all share them together.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.